What's up, baby cakes? Welcome to my channel. My name's Sancherito, brother of Poncherito. Today I'm going to show you how to do a hyperlapse from start to finish. I'm going to show you how to shoot it, then I'm going to show you how to edit it. You ain't going to need no other hyperlapse videos. This is the best hyperlapse video you're ever going to watch in your life. Alright, first things first. When you're shooting a hyperlapse, the first thing you want to find is an area with a lot of room to move around. Make sure you got enough room to shoot that hyperlapse before you try and go and shoot it and mess up halfway through and now you don't know what the hell happened, alright? That's the first thing. The second thing you need when you're going to shoot a hyperlapse is you want to find a straight line. The straighter the line, the better, alright? You don't want to be moving in and out. It's just going to make your hyperlapse be all wiggly jiggly all over the place like some big girl's booty cakes, okay? You want to make sure that that line is straight. You can follow it from start to finish. When you got a straight line, your hyperlapse is going to be much easier to stabilize when it comes to post-processing. The next thing you're going to need is a wide-angle lens. That way you can fit all of your object into the frame and you can have room for stabilization. So when it comes to stabilization, you're going to lose a lot of that room. What's going to happen is you're going to end up cutting off some of the top, bottom, and sides of the frame, and maybe your object might not fit in the end. So it's a good idea to walk down different parts of the hyperlapse on that line. You're taking your pictures and make sure that at all times your object is going to fit inside the frame, because I know the first time I went and did a hyperlapse, I didn't plan for that and I got all the way down there. When I went to look at my hyperlapse after, well, half my object wasn't even in the frame all the way, all right? One more thing to be aware of is there might be a turning point if you're going to go past that object, all right? On this obelisk hyperlapse that I did, when I got to a certain point, my body could no longer shoot and I had to turn. So it's a good thing to make sure you plan on that before you shoot the hyperlapse. If not, what will happen is you might get off the center line when you're trying to figure out where you need to turn. So what I did with this one is when I got to that point of no return, I made sure to take my left foot and stick it where my right foot was so that my camera would be in the same place, all right, in the center. And then I kept walking backwards, following that same center line I was following on the way there. All right, baby cakes? It's also a good idea to make sure none of these rabid ducks are in the way too. Because I know that when I was trying to shoot my hyperlapse, some of these ducks got in the way and almost attacked me. So make sure you got no rabid ducks inside your sight when you're trying to start your hyperlapse. Might mess the whole thing up for you. All right? You also want to set your camera to take the biggest photos as possible and also raw photos so you got more room in editing. So you can bring out more colors, maybe dim the highlights, get more detail in your pictures. Come on, baby cakes. Turn on the grid lines inside your camera, all right? The grid lines are gonna help you keep your object in the center of the frame, and they're also gonna help you line it up so that it fits in your frame the entire time. What I did on this obelisk hyperlapse is I took that obelisk and put the top of it right on that top grid line so that it stayed on that exact same spot the entire time. This is gonna help you in post stabilization. Another tip is to use manual mode or some kind of priority mode. What I did is set my aperture on 8 so that I had a bigger depth of field and I knew everything was going to stay in focus. Put it on aperture priority mode because it's sunny and then cloudy, sunny, cloudy, sunny, cloudy, sunny, cloudy every 2 seconds. Goes back and forth like my girlfriend trying to make up her mind about what we're going to eat for dinner. All right? That way, no matter how sunny or cloudy it got, it always stayed exposed. I set the exposure where I needed it and that sucker was locked in for the remainder of the shoot. Helps out a lot in post-processing and helps keep your image balanced. Now if it's just an overcast day like this day, there's no cloudy, sunny, then you're pretty good, just keep it on manual mode. All right, another thing that you need to consider is this. How many pictures you're gonna need to make your hyperlapse, all right? So if you're putting this sucker on a 24 frames per second timeline, that means there's 24 pictures in 1 second of footage. That means 240 pictures is 10 seconds worth of footage, all right? Another thing you gotta keep in mind is if you're gonna speed this up in post-processing. So if you plan on a 10-second footage, well, once you speed up, it could be 4 seconds. I know my hyperlapse was 244 pictures. It was around a little bit over 10 seconds. After I put that speed ramp up in that sucker, it'll end up being around 4 seconds, all right? So keep that in mind too when you're shooting your hyperlapse. How many steps it's gonna take? A good idea is to go to where you want to end your hyperlapse and walk backwards and count them steps, see where you want to start. That way you know exactly how many steps you want to take. Make sure your steps are evenly spaced apart as well. You don't want to be taking steps in different distances, different lengths, and you don't want to be off the center line. The next thing is you got to make sure that in between your shots, you have the exact amount of time, the same time, all right? So me, I timed 7 seconds in between my shots. Reason I use 7 seconds is that gave me enough time to shoot the picture, come back down, take my step, push it back, put my camera back up there, line it up, get my center point focused, get my camera level, and then shoot. All right, sometimes I almost didn't have enough time, and sometimes I did a little bit faster than 7 seconds, but I figured that 7 seconds was good for me. Made a really good, easy, smooth way, all right? Especially if you're gonna be using a tripod, it's gonna be a lot harder to level your tripod, get it correct, and then move that camera within a certain amount of time. So you wanna make sure you're not using like 2-second intervals, because then you might end up being 7 or 10 seconds before you take your next shot. Make sure you time that correctly. Give it a couple tries. See how long it's gonna take you to shoot that shot, get that picture, take a step forward, get your camera back up there, get your object back in focus, your camera back level, and then take the shot, all right? For me, 7 seconds seem to be pretty damn good, all right? Now, once you finally got all this stuff figured out, it is finally time. It's time to go shoot this hyperlapse, make it pay. Once you start this hyperlapse, you be ready to go until it's done. Took me around 20-something minutes to get mine done, start to finish. You can't have any distractions. Turn your cell phone off. Make sure you done drink some water. Make sure you done pissed if you had to, because if not, you ain't gonna be able to stop. You're gonna have to piss your pants in the middle of your hyperlapse, all right? Or you have to stop, but I ain't stopping. Once I start, I'm going. And if you're wondering why I'm wearing my work boots, because that's what I do for a living. I work. I ain't in some office like Peter McChicken or like Casey Nutsack, all right? We're out here doing business. We're in the real world. We're working. We're learning hyperlapses. We're learning how to shoot photography and video, all right? Once you do all that, you got it ready, it's time to go shoot, all right? Then we edit. That's where the fun really begins. See you there. All right, so here we are at my computer, or my PC for some of you scientific folk. First thing we're gonna do is find the files, the raw files that you took pictures of. Right click on the first one, and then open with Lightroom Classic. Now that's what I edit my photos with. You can edit with whatever you'd like to. Then I'm going to select all photos right here, or check all in the bottom left. And I'm just going to import these bad boys. Now after they're imported, I'm going to go over here to develop. And the great thing about this, I'm just going to develop the one, and then I'm going to sync it across all the other ones. So I'm not going to show you how to edit it right now, because this is up to you how you want to edit it. It's all personal preference. Here we go. So now that I'm done editing this son of a bee, I'm going to run down here to the last photo. I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to left click. Then I'm going to click sync. This little box is going to pop up and I'm going to check all of them. If all of them aren't checked, I'm going to say synchronize. Now all my photos are going to look the same. They have the same editing down. Double check, make sure the editing worked. Looks like it did. Alright. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this son of a bee. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep them all selected. Then I'm going to come up here to the left of the screen, click File, then I'm going to click Export. Alright, so after you click Export, this little box is going to pop up. You want to make sure you choose the file you want to export it to. I already made one on the desktop. Let's make another one for you. New file. Hyperlapse 2. Alright. Choose that file folder and then select folder. Alright. Now you want to make sure you come down here to rename to. Click on this and click Custom Name Sequence. You can name it whatever you want. I called mine Hyperlapse Obelisk, and then make sure the start number starts with 1. This is important. Alright. Come down here to the file settings. Click JPEG or whatever else you'd like. I use JPEGs, and then make sure the quality's at 100 so we get that maximizer. Alright, then just click Export. Now make sure you wait for this export to be done. It's going to take a while because it's an old program. It's like a classic antique. So make sure this is done before you go over there into the next step. Make sure this bar fills up all the way and these are completely exported. Alright, let's go on the next one. Now this is where it's about to get scary for some of y'all. But don't worry. As long as you stick with old Sanchorito, you shall have no fear. I'll make this as easy as cooking a wiener sausage in a microwave. Next, we open After Effects. So the next thing we're going to do is start a new project. When you get to the new project screen, we got a couple things to cover first. We got to make sure that you import your image sequence at the right frame rate. So come up here to the top left toolbar, click on Edit, come down here and click on Preferences, and then click on Import. Now right here under Sequence Footage, you want to make sure that if you're using a 24 frames per second timeline, you change this to 23.976. If not, it might be on 30. And you don't want 30 if you're using a 24 frames per second timeline, because if you are, you're going to have drop frames. Alright, so once you change that to 23.976, click on OK. Now when we import the file, we're going to have the correct amount of frames. All our images are going to be there in the sequence. Next thing you do, come up here to this project window, right click, and then select Import, File. Then find the folder where you save the image sequence. Double click it. All you got to do is click on one of these bad boys. Then make sure this Import JPEG sequence is clicked. See a check mark? And import. Now you got your image sequence imported into After Effects with the correct frame rate. 23.976. Now all you want to do, grab this file right here, drag it down here to this little color box with little shapes on it, and then let go of it. Now you got yourself a new composition with your image sequence right here. So for now, what I recommend you do before this thing crashes on you is go up here to File, Save As, and save this bad boy in a spot that you'll remember. Preferably the same file location, alright? So I'm going to save this, click on Hyperlapse 2, and I'm going to put Hyperlapse 2 again, alright? Save. Now a lot of times what you could do is come back down here, and you can right click and go ahead and click on Track and Stabilize and add that warp stabilizer, alright? Now if you shot this thing on a tripod, that might just work. But since we shot a handheld like a bunch of pros, we know they ain't going to work for our footage, alright? And if you shot it on a drone, it may work too. So you can go ahead and right click there, try to stabilize it with warp stabilizer. But in my opinion, warp stabilizer is a big piece, and it doesn't work for me. It doesn't give me the stable footage that I need. So we're going to have to go a little bit deeper here, baby cakes. So if you tried warp stabilizer and your footage still look like a big fat turd wobbling all over the screen, then let's go to this one, alright? So the next thing you got to do is make sure your footage is selected, and come up here to Tracker. We want to click on Stabilize Motion, alright? Then you see this position right here, you want to make sure this position is checked and nothing else. What that's going to do is bring up this little nodule track point type thing. You can move the track point by just selecting it, but since I can't see it, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Now what I'm going to do, since this track point is so small, I'm going to try to enlarge it, alright? So I'm going to left click on it, and I'll drag one of these corners bigger, alright? Then I'm going to click on the center one, and I'm going to make it bigger too as well, right? Now, we don't know how big you want your box, depending on how big your focus point was, but me, I like for this outside box to be about double the size of this smaller box right here in the middle. Seems to work pretty good, alright? So now I'm going to select all that and grab it and move it up to where my focus point was when I took the hyperlapse. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so I can see. 200%. Click the space bar, get the hand, grab it, drag it. Alright. Now we can see that little crosshair right there. I'm going to put that right on the point of this obelisk, alright? And now I want a lot of room out here on these boxes so that they can differentiate this obelisk from the sky. If you see that when you track this forward that your box starts flying all over the place, it's probably because your box isn't big enough. But it could be something else. So what I'm going to do now that I've got this track point in the right place, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on Analyze Forward. It's this single arrow, alright? And now I'm going to let the tracker do its work. If you have any issues while this is being tracked, if you see this box fly way out of the place, all you got to do is click this stop button, okay? Right now it's tracking pretty good, it looks like. You can see these little tracking points from the previous frames are moving all over the place, but this crosshair is staying right where it needs to be, alright? Okay, I'm going to stop it right there for a minute because my track point's kind of drifted a little bit. I'm going to zoom back in. It's just drifted a tiny bit, but I want to be as accurate as possible. I'm going to put it right back there, and I'm going to keep on tracking forward. It's drifting a little bit again, so I'm going to come back, put that back on the tip right there. And if I think that it may have drifted on a previous frame, you can come down here to your project, click this little arrow, make sure that tracker is selected, and now you can see all your little track points on each keyframe, right? If you think that it's messed up, then all you got to do is hold down Control, click the arrow back, and now you can just reposition that wherever you want. So if it's jumping all over the place, see this one's kind of a little bit higher too. That's all you got to do. Grab a hold of it reposition it. All right, and we'll move back forward to the next keyframes by putting control forward, control forward. All right, we're back on track. We start tracking again. All right, so it seems like it's having a glitch. Something's not working. And I'm going to just manually frame it one by one. So all you got to do, hold control, go to the next frame. Move it on there. All right, zoom out a little bit. Go to the next frame. All right, move it. All right, we got to the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit apply. When I hit apply, this little box is going to pop up. X and Y, just click OK. Right now you can see the double keyframes here at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and save mine. And now we'll take a look at what it looks like. All right, so here's the before. You see how the center's jumping all over the place? It's kind of jumping up and down, especially down here near the end. Here, that a lot of our image is missing on the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to composition settings, and I'm just going to make this width a little bit bigger. And I'm going to make the height bigger until that entire image is in the center of that frame. Alright? Alright, so you can see it's much cleaner, and now our obelisk is sitting in the same spot. The tip of it is in the same spot on every picture. The only problem is that it's swaying back and forth. So now we go on to the next step. I'm going to go ahead and save that. We're going to take that comp that we made earlier, and we're going to grab that, and we're going to drag it back down there, that little picture with the shapes on it. It's going to make us the comp number 2. Alright? Now we start fresh, and we got our position already locked in. Next thing we got to do is we got to track the rotation, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's definitely not very long either. So what we want to do, we want to take that hyperlapse obelisk, and we want to grab it, and we're going to come down here to this little shapes thing again and let go of it. Now we've got hyperlapse obelisk number 2 composition. All right, now our position's already locked in, but our rotation is not, so that's why it's swaying back and forth. So now what we got to do is we got to track it for the rotation. So what we got to do now is we got to make sure this hyperlapse obelisk 2 is selected. Make sure we click on it, and then come back over here to stabilize motion again. And this time we're going to click on rotation, and then we're going to click off of position, and it's going to give us 2 tracking points. I'm going to spread them apart, and I'm going to make them bigger just by grabbing the corners. And I'm going to do the same thing with this tracking point. That way I can move them around easier. Go back here to zoom back out to about 33, and I'm going to start to move these where I want them. Alright, and now what you want to do here is you want to find a straight edge. Like imagine the edge of a hardware sausage. Alright, can you imagine the edge of a hardware sausage that's frozen? That's exactly what we want. And so I could use this edge right here, but it's not very straight. It's kind of at an angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the first tracking point up here on the tip, same spot that I had the first tracker, and then I'm going to put the other one down here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make this small box just as big as the edge of that obelisk, and then that way I know that if it's on the outside edge, then this crosshair's in the middle, that's a fairly straight line. We got the tip right down the tip, and then we got that right there in the middle. Now I could also use this building right here, the edge of this building. I could put the first tracker right there, and I could also put the second tracker right here, but I don't feel like the edge is long enough. If you put them too close, then what will happen, you'll still get a lot of wobble and maybe some kind of disorientation. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the longest points I can, and since this moves a lot, these buildings may move too with it, but the obelisk always stays there in the center. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to keep this line as straight as I can and as far away as I can. So I'm going to put this one right here on the top of that block. I could probably even put it right on the bottom, but I'm not for sure. I think it gets covered up at some point. And I'm going to keep that other one right at the top here on the top tippy top. Alright, now that I've got the tracking points, I do the same thing as before. I go over here and I analyze forward. If I got any problems, I just push stop. So if you're manually tracking this and you're moving these tracking points around, alright, one thing you got to keep in mind is that these are keyframes. You have to have this little diamond wherever you move it when you manually track or when you're tracking right here. And if you don't got those diamonds, that means that if you move off of this, this box is liable to move. So what you want to do to keep that in place, you got to make sure that these triangles right here are checked on the left hand side under feature center, confidence, and attach point. That's on track point 1 and 2. If you don't got them tracking points there, these boxes may move around freely. So you got to make sure they're locked into place if you're manually tracking. It should automatically track it when you move it, but sometimes the box isn't added. Alright, now that we're done, click apply. Now it looks a lot better, but there's still something up a little bit. It's still kind of moving a little bit. It could be because of my accuracy, but it could also be because there's one other thing. Now right now, if you click on this composition screen, there's this little crosshair right there. That's your rotation point, and that means that everything is rotating around this point right there. So if we take our rotation right here and turn the screen, see how it's rotating against that point? Now we don't want that to happen. We actually want this to be rotating around the point that we actually initially focused on right up here where we set our first target on our position. Alright, so what we got to do is got to come over here. What I'm going to do is going to zoom in a little bit. And then right up here in the top left screen, there's this little box with 4 arrows. It says pan behind anchor point tool. Click on that and then grab this anchor point and move it to the point where you've put your first tracking on the position, alright? Or where you focused on when you were making the hyperlapse. This is mine right there, okay? Now everything's going to rotate around that area. Now you can see this is a lot more stable. There is still some movement. That's probably just my tracking points. I wasn't being too accurate on this one. So now we could go ahead and add some motion blur here too by going up here to effects on the right side and typing in CC force blur, force motion blur, and you can actually add that effect on there and add some blur to it. But I'm going to do mine slightly different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this exposition just like this at the same size. Alright, so now I'm going to export it so I can do the rest in Premiere Pro. So come up here to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Alright, make sure that render settings is on best settings. Make sure the output module is set on high quality. And then right over here on Output 2, you can click that and you can tell it where you want to save it. So you can go ahead and create the file right now. I already got mine created. I already got it named Hyperlapse Oblips 2. And now I'm just going to click Save. Then I'm going to come over here and click Render. I'm just going to wait for that to render, and then it's going to be done, and I'm going to open it up in Premiere Pro. Alright, so now I'm here in Premiere Pro, and I'm going to go ahead and make a new sequence. Come up here to File, New, Sequence. I'm going to come down here and choose Red RED, HD 4K, 16:9, 23.976. Then I'm going to import this file by right-clicking here in the project panel, clicking Import. Then I'm going to find my file, Hyperlapse Oblips 2, click on it, open, and then now it's here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it over to the timeline. Left click, drag it, it's on the timeline now. It's going to ask me if I want to change sequence settings. I'm going to say no, I want to keep existing settings. First I'm going to render this bad boy so I can scrub through it pretty easy. Come up here to Sequence and Render into Out. Now that I can scrub through it, I'm going to try to get this thing about where I want it. It's already in the position to the left and right pretty good, so now I just want to get the height on it. Alright, so you can see that there's red right here. I'm going to try to slide this up on this position keyframe, see if I still see any red. Alright, I don't see any red anymore. There's some right here. So I have to come up over here, drop a keyframe, move it a little bit higher. There's a little bit, somewhere right up here, so I'm going to come a little bit further. Drop it a little bit higher. And I'm going to do this all the way to the end. Alright, so once I have my position where I want it, I'm going to right click this, I'm going to nest it. It's going to ask me what I want to name it. I'm just going to say OK. Then I'm going to open this back up like this. And now I'm going to start the speed remapping. Alright, so what I want it to do, I want it to kind of gradually increase speed until I get right down here around this obelisk. And then I want it to slow down for just a minute right around here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click up here next to the name on this FX button. And I'm going to click time remapping speed. Then I'm going to go ahead and drop a keyframe right here to lock in that speed. Then I'm going to come back a little bit further and I'm going to drop another keyframe right here. Then I'm going to lift this up so it gets faster. There's two gray handles right here. I'm going to grab this one, left click and pull it over. So by pulling this handles over, what I'm doing is I'm going to start slowly ramping right from the beginning. I'm going to move all the way over. I'm going to ramp all the way up here. I'm going to remain constant fast speed right here, and then when we get right about here, I'm going to start trying to slow back down again. So I'm going to grab this handle. I'm going to pull it over. Alright, so we can start slowing back down. So when we hit the bottom of this ramp right here, that's when we're going to go slow. I actually want it to be a little bit further back, so I'm going to pull this back a little bit. I'm going to pull this right here. And then I'm going to come over here to this little handles that popped up. I'm going to left click it and slide it sideways until these angles round off. You see how it rounded off? I'm going to do the same thing to this side. I'm going to click right here, grab the handle, turn it sideways until it rounds off. Now you got a smooth ramp. Alright, so let's see what it looks like. Let me render it real quick. Alright, it's done rendering. Let's check it out. Alright, that's smoother than Grandma's gravy. What I'm going to do is add the motion blur. Now, like I said, you could have done this a different way, but me personally, I want to make sure that everything else is blurry except for my obelisk, because my obelisk is the center of attention. It's my focal point, and I figure that I want this to be clear and the rest to be motion blurred, so you can keep a good clean eye on this obelisk. Now that's just personal preference. You can do whatever you like, but that's how I like my hyperlapses to be. I want my main point of focus to stay in focus. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest it one more time. Then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to hold down on Alt on my keyboard, and then I'm going to left click and slide this sucker up. You can also just right click on it, come up here to copy, and then paste as well. Then I'm going to click on the top of the sequence. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to click the right arrow button. Alternatively, you can just drag it over one frame. That's going to offset these two sequences by one frame. I'm going to come down here to the end and I'm going to move this top sequence back level with this one. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is create a mask over this. I'm going to come up here to opacity, click on opacity, I'm going to click on this ellipse right here. Alright, after I click on the ellipse, I'm going to come over here to inverted, click invert to invert the mask. Alright, once it's inverted, I'm going to come over here and try to make this ellipse just a little bit bigger than my obelisk. Or you can also, if you want to be really technical, is you can actually grab this pen tool and actually make the mask the exact shape of your obelisk. But I'm not going to take that much time right now. I think this will look just fine. So I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger than my obelisk. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this feather up to about 30-40%. That way the mask is not noticeable. So after we got the mask set, let's come down here to mask opacity, put on around 50. And what that's going to do is create this blur. Alright, now everything but our obelisk is going to be blurry. Alright, so now we can try to track it forward using this track selected mask forward, which is going to track it all the way to the end, or we can try to track it one frame at a time. See that? If we click it once, it'll track it one frame at a time, and then we can just kind of slide it back down and resize it if we need to. If you want to track it more than one frame, you can. You can click this track selected mask forward, and it will track it a lot more frames. You can see right here, I just did it for a second, and it tracked it a whole bunch of frames. The problem with that is the mask may move, so we'll just go through it and check. Looks alright, we'll keep them the same, and if not, we'll go ahead and move it. Alright, so that's it. Now let's render through it real quick and check it out. Looks like gravy to me. What we can do is also you can stop in here sometime and check out and see if you can see that circle. See right there, I can kind of see the mask a little bit. If you want to adjust a little bit, you can. You can always pull this in a little bit right here, wherever you see it, and if you see any kind of edges around there, just increase your feather just a tiny bit if the mask is noticeable. And if you want that motion blur to start immediately and not just take a frame, which no one's going to notice if it starts on a frame or not, but if you want to, you can go ahead and cut this, delete it, And now the motion blur starts right from the beginning, but you lose a frame. So I don't think anyone's going to notice anyways. But if you like it like that, go ahead. Now select both these, right click, nest one more time. So now what we want to do is hold this and either right click and copy it and then paste it, or we just hold Alt on our keyboard, grab it, drag it over to the end, right click this one, select speed duration, reverse speed. Okay, here's what it looks like after rendering. That's it. Alright, you can nest this one more time, or we can just go ahead and export it. So come up here to File, Export, Media. Box is going to pop up. Alright, now what you want to do is come over here to Location, click on it, find the location where you want to save your file, rename it to whatever you want. Final obelisk, click Save. Alright, now you get the location. Next thing you do is you got to put the preset in, or you got to change these settings. I like mine to be high quality, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click H.264 for the format. I'm going to keep this at 340 x 2160, frame rate 23.976. I'm going to click on More, come down here and click Use Maximum Render Quality and Render at Maximum Depth. Put the bitrate settings to constant bitrate, change it to 100. We don't need to worry about audio because there is no audio. And then once we have all that done, you can also save this if you'd like to by clicking right here, saving as a preset, or you can go ahead and just click Export. Alright, once you click Export, it's going to start exporting. Alright, and here's the final.